I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Roger Stark. Roger is our director of our Center for Healthcare. We have 6 centers at the Washington Policy Center, and it's great to have Dr. Stark directing our healthcare center. He comes with a unique perspective. He's a retired surgeon, so he started the Heart Surgery Center at Overlake Hospital, one of the main hospitals over in the Seattle, Bellevue area. So he comes from a different perspective, a policy perspective, but also that of a provider, a healthcare provider. He wrote a great book, which is for sale after this session, called The Patient-Centered Solution. It's a great, easy-to-read book about how we got to the situation in healthcare, and then more importantly, what the solutions are. He's done great work for us over the years at the Policy Center. And even though we're a state-based think tank, as I mentioned, and focus most of our work on the legislature, he was just asked to testify before Congress. So he is leaving tomorrow to fly back to D.C. to testify before a congressional committee on Obamacare. So it's a great opportunity for the Washington Policy Center. Again, we focus mostly on state policy, but Congress invited us to testify, Dr. Stark in particular, to testify tomorrow in D.C. So he's taken off right after this session to do our first ever testimony before a congressional committee. So we're very excited about that, and it shows you the credibility and the important work that Dr. Stark is doing at the Policy Center. So with that, I'll turn over to Dr. Stark.
Well, thanks very much, Dan. And I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome all of you to the 2013 Solution Summit here in Tri-Cities. This is a tremendous event, and we got a tremendous turnout, so thanks for being here. Just a couple of housekeeping things. First of all, I would like to thank the home builders of the Tri-Cities, and in particular Jeff Losey, for being co-presenters for this part of the session. And is Jeff here this morning? I haven't seen Jeff. Yeah, please stand, Jeff, and yeah. This part of the session, as Dan mentioned, is going to focus on health care, and specifically we're going to look at the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, and what the future holds. And we have a tremendous speaker who's going to lead the discussion here. Just real briefly, I'd like to give you an update on what we're doing at the Healthcare Center for the Washington Policy Center. Since the Affordable Care Act passed, there's been a lot of interest, a lot of concern on the part of the Washington State citizens. We've been doing a lot of public speaking. We probably average 3 to 4 major presentations a month, at least one a week. People want to know about what is in the bill and how it's going to affect their families. We also do a considerable amount of writing. We've had op-eds published in the Seattle Times, the Spokesman Review. We have been quoted in the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post. We are also currently updating our very popular impact study on how the Affordable Care Act is going to impact the citizens of Washington State, and we hope to have that ready to be released after the first of the year. It is now my pleasure to introduce Mr. Tom Miller. Tom is a resident fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, which is a think tank based in Washington, D.C. The AEI is committed to expanding liberty, increasing individual opportunity, and strengthening free enterprise. He is a former senior health economist for the Joint Economic Committee, the JEC. He studies healthcare policy and regulation. He is a former trial attorney, a journalist, a sports broadcaster. The man has done it all. Mr. Miller is the co-author of Why Obamacare is Wrong for America, and he heads the AEI Beyond Repeal and Replace Health Reform Project. He has testified before Congress on many occasions and many issues, including the uninsured, healthcare costs, Medicare prescription drug benefits, health insurance tax credits, genetic information, Social Security, and federal reinsurance of catastrophic events. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Tom Miller.
Still available at remainder bins everywhere, I point out. HarperCollins Books. It was 2011. Pleasure to be with you. Thank you very much, Roger and Dan. I'm on the clock, so I need to get up to warp speed pretty quickly. Let's see if we've got this working. I'm clicking. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. Sorry. Okay. That's the quick movie trailer for where we've been on health policy, from Groundhog Day to World War Z to Apocalypse Not Quite Right Now. Just to remind you, spanning 3 different decades of movie-making fiction which approaches healthcare policy truth. Groundhog Day, where you keep doing the same thing again and again on the same day with similar results, a little bit of a steep learning curve. I thought when the administration announced that they would extend the individual mandate by an extra 6 weeks, they should wait till February 2nd to announce that, say 6 more weeks without Obamacare. We've also got the various administration implementers and advocates trying to scale a very steep wall in a somewhat zombie-like trance. They keep doing it mindlessly again and again. Going back a little bit further to the 1970s, you know, we got the best and the brightest trying to fix the system echoes of Vietnam days. Apocalypse not right now. Many of the folks who are opposed to this say, oh, it's going to crash, it's going to fail, everything will be over and done with. Maybe not quite to that extreme version, although I think at least the first horseman of the 4 horses of the apocalypse is definitely headless thus far that we've seen. All right, where are we with Obamacare? Let me count the ways. Basically, aside from the standard things, I think it's really the various delays, distortions, deals, and disguises that have really hit people hard. Exceptions of the rule, rewrite it as you want. And also, Obamacare's had to kind of live off the land. You know, had to barely get it through, didn't have much funding for implementation, maybe not quite pestilence, but at least the day of the locusts in terms of trying to live whatever they can find in the HHS budget to afford the implementation. Checking the vital signs, what we really find out is it's not campaign season anymore. You know, the marketing team was really good with its messages. They weren't talking to the folks in product development in terms of the exchange and what would actually work. It's one thing to talk about what you're going to do 3 or 4 years later. When the day arrives, the execution is actually pretty hard, and the promises begin to meet up with performance accountability. So we've got the various items of the false pricing, same prices for folks below 50 or above 50 without age adjustments, the missing footnotes but beyond the periods, whether it's keeping your own plan or your own doctor, and dropping the mask as to what this was really all about after all is said and done. Of course, we've got a number of officials who are willing to take the responsibility for all this, but not the blame. The important ingredient is people who take the blame lose their jobs. You still have to remember, though, despite all this, the exchanges and the rest of Obamacare is not dead yet. In the old Monty Python and the Holy Grail, medieval scene of bringing out your dead with the plague, the exchanges keep claiming to be getting better, feeling fine, thinking about going for a walk. I'll spare you of the YouTube video. You can probably find it, though, from the mid-'70s. If you want an older Python script, you can think about when the irate customer goes back into the pet store, I think about 30 minutes later after finding out that the Norwegian blue parrot he purchased was dead. You see it kind of perched upside down. This is kind of like Sebelius or Tavener testifying before the congressional committees explaining, no, it's really not that bad, what's going on here. You know, in the original script, they're talking about first it was just resting, then the kind of guy shook the cage, it said stunned him, you know, when you shook it there. It was pining for the fjords, likes sitting on his back. Lovely plumage. Finally, the ultimate offer is to trade it in for a slug, but the slug doesn't talk, pretty much like many of the exchange log-on exercises. Nevertheless, you know, you got to be in a reality-based world. This law has neither been repealed nor replaced, despite its unpopularity and dysfunctionality. You can look at the polls, but that's not necessarily, you know, enough to drive it over the top, because overturning permanent law is very hard in any climate, but particularly in one where you can't pass almost anything in Congress, pro or con. And of course, in the words of central planners everywhere, the 19th century German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche originally said, "What doesn't kill me makes me stronger." But in the case of Obamacare, it maybe makes it undead for life, signing up for the long-term coverage plan. Sprint like, yes, it is a bit of a zombie. All right, the fact is that the inevitable in all of this stuff was unavoidable. It's not just mistakes in execution. This was kind of baked into the cake for trying to do something. Most of the problems with whether it's the coverage, the pricing, the exchange, these were features, not bugs. It was designed in a way which was going to blow up, but it wasn't like they just executed it in the wrong manner. And of course, if you're trying to take over, almost a fifth of the economy, you can't do this all at once as a hostile takeover. So it had to happen in stages. First, it took a while to set up the early implements, but ultimately the idea is to swallow more and more of the private sector, but they couldn't do it all at once, so they started with the individual market and some of the small business market. So what the administration is now facing is its worst nightmare. It has visible victims, the people with canceled policies, but it doesn't have anything that's actually delivered in terms of the coverage goods. So it's got the losses before the gains. That's a place you do not want to be in a political crisis mode. And we've also seen much more of the visible head pats of the top-down paternalism. I know it doesn't look good to you, but it really is good for you. Stop complaining, because this is all going to work out eventually. Now, could this be fixed? The idea of a butterfly bandage is to kind of hold the wound at its ends, around the edges, or perhaps rather than, although it's only a flesh wound, of course, I don't want to get into that one as well. That would be the Dark Knight. Or it's really not butterfly bandages, but a butterfly effect. Something in one part of the world whips around in these exchanges. They're all interconnected, so when something breaks down, something else breaks down, and you get that, not a synergy, but the exact opposite of that effect, chain reactions and meltdowns, because this was wired in a way that one thing connected to the other one, and when one dysfunctions, the other one dysfunctions as well. So what have we got in this evolving political landscape? Now, it's not all the environment of a couple of years ago. I think, the fiscal arguments, the debt horrors receded a little bit, even though there's a permanent problem out there. It doesn't have the same urgency as it might have a couple of years ago. Health spending is down. Of course, the real reason is, take a recession and slow growth, and I'll call you in the morning, is the main effect in terms of slowing down health spending. But that makes it seem like you can claim that there's not as much of a problem. So we're playing the expectations game also, which is each side trying to, how low or how high can you go? Any heartbeat at all in terms of enrollment is considered a success these days. So it's redefining what success is, or defining deviancy down, if you will, in the old Moynihan sense. And we've got also a lot of changes in the health industry. You want to go into the Wayback Machine and revive everything from a couple of years ago, but most of the major players, mistakenly, short-term thinking, have moved on. So they built their business plans around the idea this would actually succeed. And it's hard to necessarily regenerate in the test tube what was the prior market. Some plans aren't there, some players aren't there, and they're somewhat built-in investors in this system that isn't working for them. So the effort is, if you just have enough regulation-induced horrors, you'll create innovation by people having to work around it out of necessity and find a way out of the box. But we're also seeing the other changes in terms of a move back toward narrow networks, higher cost sharing. You wouldn't have thought that was the signature of this law, and also the extension of Medicaid into Medicaid-light plans in a lot of the exchanges. Now, the effort is to some short-term wall off the existing private market to the larger employers of these firewalls that are a little flammable. We're not sure what would actually happen if the exchanges function, and whether employers would continue to offer in the same way, or look to see the exchanges as a dropout option. We've also got a different kind of competition, because it's really important, when you know that your main customer is the government, to begin to reconfigure. And the only survivors are going to be the big folks who can stay at the table. So they're competing more to simply get bigger. This is this idea of sectoral competition. Each, maybe that's a multi-specialty group, but it could also be the difference between the insurers lining up against the pharmaceutical folks, against the physicians. The idea is you got to be really big, which is why we're seeing a lot of the vertical integration as well as the horizontal integration. That only the big will survive. They may be a little fat and slow, but they'll be the last folks kind of playing on the table. So some political takeaways from all this. What's really important in this experience is, unlike what the architects of this thought was going to happen, we are tarnishing the bigger government brand. If you like this from big government, we've got some other things on our shelves we'd like to cross-sell you at the same time. It's not working out that way. It's working out the exact opposite of what the administration hoped. And of course, every second term is difficult for a president, but you're hearing a lot more quacks and noticeable limps in terms of the early onset of lame duck disease in the White House. And as opposed to the pooling equilibrium they always talk about in insurance markets, we're getting separating equilibrium in the political context. Senate Democrats in particular are up for re-election, saying, I need my job. I got to posture a little bit differently than I did before. I'm beginning to put a little distance between myself and the White House. A lot of this is for show. Each one has like their one thing they get to propose, but they all don't agree on the same thing, so they all look like they're looking for a solution. We've seen about 4 or 5 of those. Nevertheless, you're getting that beginning of a splintering apart and some blame shifting. Not just external, which is the usual, it's their fault versus our fault, and whether it's the insurers, whether it's the Republicans, or et cetera, but internal blame shifting. This has been a relatively leak-free White House. That's starting to change, where the folks from the inside are saying, I was the brilliant one who wouldn't have had this happen. We've had a couple of those memos already come out. There'll be more of that, particularly if they push some folks too hard. There'll be some retaliations. Now, in the political sense, the real trade-off is, you go back in the Wayback Machine a month ago, with Chairman and Mr. Peabody, and shutting down the government for 2 weeks. The Republicans, this is terrible, we're going to be clobbered at the polls. Well, what would you rather do? Shut down the government for 2 weeks, it's over, annoyance, all that type of stuff, or shut down someone's ability to have health insurance for another year? That's going to be the calculus, which might begin to change from where it was a month ago. Public opinion, as I said, you look at the polls where this is an unpopular law, but it is not overwhelmingly, incredibly despised where people will first impulse is to say repeal. So you need to be careful in terms of what the voters are saying. They don't like something that doesn't work. They haven't necessarily gone to the full nuclear meltdown alternative as yet. What would be some near-term tactics? We're already seeing them right now, whether Republicans, conservatives, other opponents, Tea Party, what have you, of the law. The main thing is obviously delegitimizing, and the evidence is right there in front of you. You can kind of play with that as long as you want. But it's more important to highlight the unfairness, the inconsistencies, and the contradictions. Put this down a little bit more at a human level, because sometimes there's a tendency to only talk about, well, this is going to raise the cost for a particular business entity, or it's going to make it harder for us to operate. You need to drill this down to what this actually means to patient and customer experience, not just make it look like another, Chamber of Commerce speech, but it has to get to kind of the broader America in order to turn those type of opinions around. You can, of course, nibble away, choose the less appealing hostages. You can see the different items up there. No surprises on that list. And think about, along the way, preserving and expanding some lifeboats and tunnels out of this sinking ship. The iceberg has surfaced, and I think we heard it crash. Let's take a look, though, a little bit more beyond just the short-term tactic, which is what everybody does in Washington. And, it's really brilliant for about another week or two until the headlines change. A little more of a medium-term reassessment where we'd like to get to, which is to deregulate, roll back, and rebalance. So all these different factors in our healthcare and health policy system. So we're really trying to re-privatize what have become incredibly politicized health markets and scale back the scope of the subsidies. We're really almost dollar trading, in one pocket, out of the other pocket. No one actually gains. It actually has some deadweight losses. But let's kind of pull them back to where they're actually targeted for what they matter. You can shoot the wounded ACA provisions, but then after you do your delays, say delay for a year, you need to answer the question. It'll come back again, despite what you think at the moment. Then what? Delaying for what reason? What else are you going to do? That tends to be the question that's not answered because everybody's playing the short term, who's up, who's down, I won, you lost political games. I would not be surprised if we don't continue to see, despite the current environment, some moderation of the state-level resistance. You've seen some of the Republican governors, if not state legislators, have their knees buckle in terms of chasing after Medicaid money. Go out a couple of years from now, if there's basically debris on the field, any port in the storm in terms of finding some type of funding for some type of coverage might mean that there'll be a different look at a modified version of either Medicaid expansion or a modified version of what are somewhat more reasonable types of exchanges. And remember, in all the midst of this tactical, shooting back and forth and the talk shows or whatever, occasionally elections matter. It helps to actually win, as opposed to just talk about winning and holding your breath till your state turns blue. Countervailing responses from the White House or Democratic advocates. We could have some short-term grandfathering. A couple of months can be done. A year might be a little hard to pull off. Stretching out open season. This actually causes more problems than it helps, but that's another instant impulse. Auto-enrollment. You have to do this with a no conscience and a straight face, which is just basically say we deem you covered. We'll work out the details later on. That's kind of the honor system also we've seen in terms of subsidies. Let the money get out the door and then say you'll chase it down later on. This is pretty bold stuff, but we've seen other things invented before. I'm just taking desperate people do desperate things. The effort, though, will be to try to somehow expand whatever state exchanges work as little beachheads. This is not quite the Normandy landing. There's not total hostile fire. But the idea is that we can just make anything survive anywhere. We'll say it was just a good start this year, and 5 states did a good job, and next year it'll be 10 or 20, and do that type of further expansion. I've got a piece coming out in National Review later today talking about Vermont and Washington, D.C. arrogantly trying to have exclusive exchanges for their individual and small group markets. Even though they can't function, that's their dream, that they eventually build this up and scale it up even beyond the 100 employers in future years. Medicaid to the max. There are ways to get a little fast and loose with the eligibility. We've already seen, in effect, Medicaid is the expansion dream for some folks to deal with cut rate, low-cost coverage other than the private version. And lighten the load. If things get tough, all the stuff that had to be in the Affordable Care Act was just so essential to the grand dream, you throw it over the side. This law has taken on a lot of water. Well, what you need to do is pump the water out, including some of the over-regulatory provisions, in order to resurface it with somewhat lighter load. And don't be surprised, out of desperation, if some of the things were absolutely essential that had to be in this law. Turns out they can live without them as long as they can say they're in charge and doing something. What are some next shoes to drop? Things we haven't already seen. Court challenges. I've been involved in a few of them. Not the contraceptive abortion cases, which are also moving up to the Supreme Court, but the federal exchange, federal tax credit subsidies. Right now, we've got 2 very live ones that could be decided in the D.C. Federal District Court, in Virginia, in the Eastern District. Could get decisions on those in either January or at the latest in February. What this would mean would basically be if you've got a federal exchange, federally facilitated, federal partnership, whatever they want to call them, because of the way the statute was written, there's no authority to dispense the federal tax credits. That's actually the law they wrote. They may not have read it, and they passed it kind of because they had no other alternative. But that's a serious threat if we can get a judge to go along with the rule of law. There's also a case in Indiana. There's an older one in Oklahoma is involved in. But that's one vector aiming at the throat. Provider networks. What happens when people find out that all these narrow networks may not meet the provider adequacy? There could be some tension on that one. They would have to dispense the full sets of regs on that. The shop exchange is a solution in search of a problem. They keep delaying actually starting them up, but it turns out there may not be many takers actually for these small business exchanges, which were somewhat thrown in there at the last minute as to what they're actually going to do. I predict a surge in people declaring themselves Amish. You have to remember the Amish could also go first say a religious exemption from health insurance. They shun commercial health insurance. They also shun the internet, so they don't have any problems with signing up with these exchanges. So I think the watchword is, I'm Amish, leave me alone. Might become very popular throughout the countryside. A little slower pace, but perhaps you'll actually turn out okay. And look out for concerns about privacy and security of online information. They're beginning to bubble up. They didn't check anything. This is wide open doors for potential online fraud. Or just as I would say, beware of the Obamacare con artists, such as people who might say you can keep your plan, period, or turn it around and turn out you can't keep your plan, period, and end up having to go on television and semi-apologize for that, even if it wasn't heartfelt. Some reality check lessons for the opponent's side, which is, and I wrote a piece in National Affairs on conservative health reform, a reality check. Rooting for failure feels real good, and just saying no, not enough. Not enough. Gets you part of the way. Worry about the politics of crisis and chaos. Usually government gets bigger. Simple fiscal formulas. We set a fiscal formula with some dollars set in the future. Turns out they don't actually hold up that way. It's just, government by autopilot. Works in terms of spending, but not usually in terms of reducing spending. One way, Medicaid federalism, where you basically give money to the states and don't ask any questions. Need a two-sided accountability, and you're playing the other Santa Claus, which is if we can't spend more money, we'll just give people tax cuts as the equivalent of it, the two Santa Claus test. Some lessons. It's important to think about the timing and the pace at which you do this. You can't run people through the windshield. We need to go faster on Medicare reform, slower on the mythical ideas we're going to suddenly go to an individual market and get rid of employer-sponsored insurance. Remember, there's a lot of consumer risk aversion, desire for predictability. Don't do and emulate what has already been a disaster for the folks pushing that. We've got a little bit of policy reform, attention deficit disorder. I can't call it hyperactivity and deficit disorder based on what's been coming on the reform side, but need to get a little more engaged with health delivery system reform, think about safety net ceilings and floors, better information, expanding the toolbox in the portfolio. And if you want to appeal to people, you better answer why before you tell them how. It needs to reinforce and reflect the basic values which are behind the alternative vision of health reform, give people an opportunity for everyone to do better, and simplify it for real people, not kind of something with propeller heads on the beanies. Get out of this, politics is everything all the time. We've overloaded the public sector tremendously, and we need to have more entry and competition into healthcare without the cronyism that's usually attached to it. So this is how we see a different world. This is kind of the basic dividing lines. I'll abbreviate it for purposes here. But think about, it's one thing to set a floor to help take care of people. Don't set a ceiling on aspiration. People want to be able to exceed that. The difference is between pro-market and pro-business, and less politics, more markets. So some basic building blocks, defined contribution financing I've written about, which is for all platforms, not just private insurance. You need to do it differently for Medicaid and Medicare, but that's the common uniting theme. You've got to retarget, protect the most vulnerable. High-risk pools with real money in them, not fake money. Continuous coverage incentives, alternative to the individual mandate. Information, incentives, innovation, getting to the bigger picture. So what does defined contribution do? It begins to unlock these decision points where it's the beneficiary, the end user who's in charge, at least initially. They choose their agents who works for them, and then reintegrate the public and private systems. With that, you get a reward structure. If you do better, you get rewarded for it. It's called a profit. It's okay. But people actually also do better by making better decisions. The Ordeal of Change, my old Eric Hoffer book that I like. From the 60s, you need to get under the hood and actually begin to, change some things. We have the common rhetoric of health delivery reform. That rhetoric doesn't actually get it done. Payment incentives help to some degree. There's going to still have to happen locally, not with some grand national master plan. We need to admit what we don't know and pay more for things out of pocket if they work better. But let the beneficiaries choose who's going to help them as agents and partners. Just about wrapped up. So the bigger picture, reverse the dependency ratio. If you have too many dependent people, it's not going to work regardless. There's more solutions to this than just healthcare. Got to fix the economy, got to educate people, got to improve health and human capital to move on. And that's a different type of approach. It also means changing some things in the delivery system to improve the supply side. Now, if we do all this and save money, will we save money or will we just improve value and people want more of it? Well, at least we'll get a better value for what we're getting, but accountability to patients, not to politicians. And if we really want to get aggressive, we're going to have to stop subsidizing the middle class because we've already got enough people who need to get subsidies and bring everything on budget. This is going to be disruptive, and we're going to have some defaults for the disengaged. But, if we want real problems, we've got to recognize it's going to be a little tough for folks to handle. Thank you very much. Take some questions. Right back there.
Recognizing that President Obama's legacy is probably pretty important to him, if he can't find another way out of this, does he at some point blame it on the public and the politicians and say we should have just done single payer in the first place like I wanted to?
You could try that, but it's not going to have much resonance. The reason why we have what we have is because there was never a political market for single payer. I know all the conspiracy theories, which is first they want to wreck the system. This is, site demolition and site preparation. First you wipe out the system, and then you say, look what we've got ready to go into it. I think that this will already have set such a black mark, if you will, for government-centered health care. The idea that you double down on your bets and go to the all-out version is not in the scope of the realistic. Back there. I should salute, by the way, Washington State. I understand you're number 2 among the states that were reporting their enrollment, with about 7,000 people in your exchanges in the latest reports from Avalier Health, although about 87% of your enrollment was in Medicaid. Of course, in Medicaid, one side can't talk to the other, and they don't actually know what's going on because the Medicaid enrollment can't happen until they can fix the system. So you're among the early adopters, I suppose. Right back there.
Sir, you talked about changing the dependency equation.
Mm-hmm.
I would suggest that we've raised dependency to an art form in this country.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder, not only is it okay, it's devoutly to be wished. So, again, an opinion.
Right.
But define middle class. Because, again, on CTAC, we're saying middle class is $15 an hour working at a fast food place, raising a family and buying a big screen. In the other, we have people getting 400% of the poverty level income being eligible for some kind of help on their health insurance. How do we reconcile all this?
Well, I actually don't like talking in class terms, but unfortunately that's the vernacular. We're all Americans. We should all aspire to move up. Now, the economy hasn't been working well for a long period of time, and there are a number of factors in that. Some of it's macroeconomic policy, some of it's demographics, some of it's, I think it goes back to our educational system as well. If you don't have people ready to be competitive in deferred decision-making and be participating people, that's a problem. What I'm basically saying is we're breaking the equation. You do need to have a generous society, even one that's not growing as fast as it did before, help people who really can't help themselves and need that assistance. And we know that category. You can argue about it to some degree. We've so redefined this, though, which is everybody gets a taste and goes all the way up the ladder. That's where you don't have the ability, you're just shuffling the dollars back and forth, and every dollar that goes through the faucet or the vending machine of fiscal Washington, doesn't deliver a dollar back. It costs money to raise taxes. It inefficiently distributes them. So we're actually losing in the equation. Ultimately, healthcare is the most noticeable. We're going to have to see the real prices of things and decide whether it's worth it. And that's going to put some downward pressure on what is actually charged for healthcare and what we use. But our political system has been way out of balance. Entitlement is, forever until the young people stop paying. So that's where it's not just a matter of, though, taking it away. We've got to actually have people with opportunity to earn incomes, to build families, to raise children, where they're prosperous and they're not victims, they're actually taking care of themselves. And that's where we're on the ground, particularly in the last decade. So that's why we need real growth built upon real fundamentals, investment, saving, capital, that will begin to turn this around. Because running it back through government dependency is a downward spiral from which we can't escape if we do that any further.
President Obama passed this promising that it would lower health care costs and many, many other things, but it seems to have done the exact opposite in almost every single way. I would have to wonder, is there anything that the Affordable Care Act does right?
Let's see. There's about, depending on which version you get printed out, there's at least 2,700 pages. I've often congratulated them for the amazingly accurate punctuation and spelling in many places. That's not 100%, but they get it right about that time. There's what I used to call the back of the book, which is the hypothetical delivery system or information transparency reforms, which with the right spirit could be at least a step in a not terrible direction. Now, doing it from the top down, the idea of a Center for Innovation in the Department of Health and Human Services is kind of an oxymoron. But there's been at least a little bit of an opening up of some of the database, Medicare, although not as much as it needs to be, for other parties to begin to pool their information, begin to get some better value measures. Now, they're going to do this very clumsily through their command and control central. We need to build on that in the right way rather than the wrong way. In the same way, we're going to have to have some experiments with different ways to deliver health care, and because Medicare is so big, whether you like it or not, it's going to have to be involved in some of that. Again, I'm not a believer in the ACOs. I take any 3 random letters and you probably get a better result than the ones they picked because they're bundling in the wrong ways where you just get the kind of chain reaction. But we do need to open up the system so that there can be more attempts to do it differently. And if you begin to succeed, what we can hope for is if it works in the private sector, the politicians will ratify it and claim it was their idea. And then maybe they'll begin to do it in that manner. So that's about as much as we can hope for. But in terms of the front-end Title I and the Medicaid expansions, all that pretty much could be tossed aside. We need to build on something different, but it's beyond the point where you can mend it. In order to mend it, you almost first have to end it. And then you have to start working on it. Now, you can't go from, one thing to another thing overnight, so there's a lot of straddles and transitions in between. We've wasted a lot of time and a lot of money when we actually had a serious problem that needed to be addressed years ago, still needs to be addressed. But if we keep doing the same dumb thing again and again, it's not just a funny Groundhog Day movie. These are real people's lives. This affects our future. We've got to reverse direction. Now we've got an opportunity where people say, boy, this is really bad. Don't just stop there. What are you going to do instead of it? That's where people need to pay more attention to what needs to happen. We've got a foundation on that, but we've got to get through to a broader audience. Right behind you.
Thank you. Debbie and I are in the car business, and we found that people tend to drive cars they can afford not all the time. We tend to buy houses we can afford. We eat at restaurants we can afford to eat at. But almost without exception, I think we expect, Americans, whatever has been developed in the healthcare world, we deserve it. And so, I mean, you can, there's some cars out there that are $200,000 and $300,000 and $400,000, $500,000 cars, but most of us don't expect, even just because it's been invented, we deserve it. But as Americans, we tend to think with regard to healthcare, if it exists, it should be ours. How did we get there, and where do we go from here? And is that the problem that I see it being?
It's a good part of the problem, and I never exempt the folks who vote for this or the people who take advantage of it and say, this is a pretty good system for me, without recognizing you're part of the problem as well. It's not just all those other people out there doing it. On the other hand, most of the environment in which people operate, you respond to the incentives you have. If you believe, and you're led to believe, that someone else is paying for most of your health care, well, you're going to act that way accordingly. We certainly don't want to say you can't have something if you're willing to pay some of your money for it. So it's not that type of, well, this is wasteful, so we're going to just ration it, we're going to take it off the market very hard to get. No, but it means we're not going to subsidize it. You think it's important enough? You need to save your money, move it from somewhere else to somewhere there. You should be able to express that preference. Whether it's tax, why is healthcare different? Well, we subsidize it a lot, so you don't see the real prices. We regulate it a lot. And we think that the actual people getting it are just kind of inconsequential parties. They're just the excuse for, dispensing a subsidy, claiming political credit, or collecting a lot of revenue in the private sector. So we don't have a system which is patient-centered or driven. The patients are about the fifth or sixth parties in a multi-party system. So if we can begin to rearrange that where you begin to, and the idea is you're not going to be your own doctor, you're not going to make every decision in the world. A lot of folks are going to say, I want to be taken care of. You can be taken care of, just you're not going to get a very good system as a result of it. You want to opt into that? Medicaid for all for those people who want that. But most of us want to do better. We care about our lives, we care about our children, our parents, and we think that we should get a better health care result where the person who's treating us is responsible and transparent and the outcomes are known and we know what it costs, and that's where we need to go. We need to move to that system, and we've been away from it for a long period of time.
I'm of the opinion that if the Affordable Care Act would have rolled out in the private sector, if it would have been something the corporation rolled out, the corporation would have been dragged through the mud in the media. What do you think has been so different for Obama in this case, besides the liberal media? But why has he been able to kind of get away with this and say the things he said post-rollout?
Well, the getting away part is because this really didn't meet a reality test until when it was coming into implementation in late 2013. There were a little bit of the initial, teasers, coverage till, you're 26 and you moved out of your parents' basement. The annual limits and, lifetime limits, pretty much no-brainers. Those were the easy things to do. But when it came about actually, transforming things and delivering a real product in a different manner, which threw everything up in the air, that's what's coming home to haunt them right now. Now, in the private sector, you might test what you're doing before you put it out there. They seem to dispense with that. It was politically driven implementation. All kinds of excuses. All those Republicans are being so mean to us, we couldn't say what we really wanted to do because then they would have criticized us. That's right. That's what elections are for. You need to be a little bit. This was rammed through in a way in which it wasn't fully revealed, despite people saying to the contrary. And they wanted to hide this as long as possible. So the reason it wasn't tested was they didn't want the test results. They didn't want the regs out early before the 2012 presidential election. All there's a reason why this was backloaded. Now, would you do this if you were running a private sector tech operation? Of course not. And there's some folks testifying this morning saying they weren't copied in on the fact that the test results weren't there. Well, this is what happens when you have something done by people who create things for political purposes rather than whether or not they actually can work. It was immense arrogance, hubris, whatever you want to call it, and saying, because we're so bright, look at all our degrees, look at all the schools we went to, and we have the best of intentions, even though you don't understand it. We can't tell you what we're going to do, but it'll be really good, and you'll just love it right away. And they've miscalculated all along the way in terms of where the rest of the public was. The public wants better health care, something that works, something that's a little bit more affordable, isn't crazy, and allows them to express their preferences. We're not getting that at all in this system, and it's crashing as a result because they're trying to do it through indirect, hidden means which could not converge and actually work together. While we're waiting for another question, remember the phrase they said, one-stop shopping in the exchanges? I think they've got a new phrase now. It's called no shop stopping. They had another phrase, no wrong door. Now it's no entry. But aside from that, it's working pretty much according to plan.
I'm with the local healthcare system, and I agree with you completely on a whole bunch of points, including where we're going. And our system's incredibly broken, and all the incentives continue to lead us to keep it broken. And we have to figure out how to make the population healthier. But it's going to take the politicians, probably, in my opinion, a decade to get us from where we're at to that point. But the exchange system and Obamacare is moving, I believe it's going to move most of the payers down towards a Medicare or Medicaid payment rate. And for the last 20 years or more, the people in this room have been paying higher insurance rates to subsidize the government's failure to pay what it costs for Medicare and Medicaid. And businesses are rightfully trying to drive their cost down. And I think we're on a train wreck trajectory, because clearly we're going to end up with businesses paying less, the American people not willing to give up what they have in terms of health care and being entitled to everything. And I don't think the American people have figured out where that train wreck's going. And 20 years from now, we're going to end up with old rundown facilities, less services, less well-trained people, and so forth. And I'd like to get your perspective on that. And the other piece is, I personally believe, and this is heresy in my business, but I really believe that single payer is a way to go, because the government will have to pay their share, and business won't have to carry them anymore. But I don't think that's politically doable for an awful long time. Thoughts?
Well, the political maxim in the 20th century probably was nothing succeeds like failure in a government program, and get perpetual life on that front. The more you fail, the more you just kind of make it bigger, or say this time it'll work on a larger scale. We haven't seen the payment rates in the exchanges drop down to Medicaid levels yet. Now, this is all thin and sketchy, and you've got a lot of folks on the insurance side trying to guess, do I want to play in this market? We got a lot of new entrants who may end up blowing up and not be around in a year or two, like the co-ops. So it's hard to say what that landscape will be. And now we've got on top of that a question how functional and deep any of the exchange enrollment will be. So if you're an employer, you're not about to dive into a pool that doesn't have any water in it. A couple of years out, it might be a different story. I think a different model for the employer community to keep an eye on, although these things are always touted, for about 5 years before they become real and actually can be tested in a larger scale, is private exchanges, which might be the different model for employers to somewhat get out of the insurance provision, but not entirely. There's at least some growth for a number of vendors on that front. There's a different model of exchange rather than these politicized exchanges. But look, we've got a larger rendezvous with all of our entitlement commitments, and you look at relatively to what our labor force growth is going to be, demographics and fiscal, all that type of stuff. We're going to have to downsize our expectations as to what can be delivered through the tax and spend and tax system. And we're going to have to earn incomes and work harder and save more money and do other things to keep ourselves healthier so we don't go into an expensive healthcare system. Now, in terms of the turnaround, look, all this, the installed base is tough. Folks have critical conditions. They're 60, 70. They're not going to go away. You're going to have to treat them. But a younger population, particularly the next generation, really, you almost start prenatal, you start in the school. That's where we're going to have to change this demand curve coming in, because the supply side isn't going to be able to handle it to the degree to which we've expected in the past. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much, Tom. I really appreciate that. That was a great presentation of a very complex problem this morning, and thanks for your terrific work, the terrific work of the American Enterprise Institute.